Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Rachael here with me. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachael. Rachel volunteered to talk about, or maybe I invited you, but you volunteered to talk about Menarche ceremonies. Rachel's been practicing facilitating young women with their menarche ceremonies for quite a number of years and has even written a book about it. And so I'm super excited to have you share with us more about your experiences around that. So could you please introduce yourself a little bit more in depth and share with us, we were talking about the difference between ceremonies that happen off at a retreat somewhere and you never see those people again versus ceremonies that happen intrinsically integrated into your life with the people that are in your life on a regular basis and the explorations you've been doing around that. So I can't wait to hear about that.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. So yeah, I'm Rachael Crow. I've been doing women's work, womb work, since my early 20s. And probably the last 15 or so years more involved with ceremonies, young women, mums, all of that. And then I think 5 or 6 years ago, a friend of mine, a mother of an 11-year-old, came to me and she'd read this amazing book and she said to me, would I gather with her and talk about create a kind of mother and daughter, we called it a mother and daughter lodge, to teach women's wisdom to our daughters. And I just said yes, I'm in. You know, my eldest is now 30, but I've also got a 10-year-old daughter, so she was much younger at that point. So I was just like, this is brilliant, because by the time she's the age, she'll, you know, this is going to be here for her, so count me in. and it kind of all went from there. And so it's been a real eye-opener for me, seeing the difference in, say, the young girls that like 15 years ago were coming and having ceremonies. I was part of a beautiful camp that still runs in the UK called Sacred Arts Camp, where they would have a ceremony every year for any of the young girls who'd started their bleed that year. And it would be held by pretty much all the women on the camp. So, you know, we'd have 200 women, kind of really powerful, really beautiful ceremonies. But then, you know, I remember it was my husband that said to me, what happens when they go home? You know, it's kind of like, we're doing these initiation ceremonies. What are you initiating them into? What, you know, where's their holding afterwards? And I could never work out what we could do about that. So yes, you could have what we did do was the girls would choose one mum and call her moon mother, and she would be with her in the ceremony, and you would hope that they would continue their relationship afterwards, and some did and some didn't. But to have that community holding is something that I haven't really seen in many places. So it's been something, yeah, that my friend Eartha that I work with we've built on. We've both we do work together and we do work separately. She's travelled around training women to hold mother and daughter lodges on the same format that we use. So there's, you know, I think there's maybe 6 or 7 groups that kind of sprung off from our original one that we started 5 years ago.
Wow, so these are meeting groups, circle groups of mothers and daughters that are gathering regularly to support each other, supporting these young women coming of age. And so how often would these groups meet?
So when we first started, so what we actually did was we gathered a core group of, there was mothers, grandmothers, a woman who did forest school who didn't have children. There was 5 of us, and we actually met for a year and kind of came together with like a program. But we also worked through our own stuff, because the thing that when you work with young people, your buttons get pressed, you know? Because, you know, the issues that they'll bring may be issues that you've had and haven't dealt with. So we really felt like it would be good for us to go back and revisit our own first blood, share those stories together, talk about how it was for us, all of that stuff to clear the way. And then we invited the mothers and we had a meeting with the mothers.
Wow.
And we decided that we would meet monthly. So we did a whole day every month. And we've actually, that 5-year group finished last summer with the girls doing a vision quest, but they were like 15 and they've got to the point where they're ready to hold it themselves. They didn't need us anymore, which is, job done.
Wow, so you started when some of the girls were 10, and for 5 years you met with the moms and the girls and did a variety of activities. I'm sure it didn't start out with a vision quest, but you started out with perhaps the moms telling their stories. And what else did you do with the girls for 5 years?
We really listened to the needs of the girls. So I would say the first year we were weaving in women's wisdom, kind of drip feeding it through kind of meditations and stories. They did a lot of cooperative games just so they gelled together as a group really well. So we were really lucky at that point. We were in a space where we had, I had a red tent yurt, and there was also an outdoor space. So the girls would play games outside while me and the mums would circle in the morning and kind of work through some of the issues or what was going on with their daughter, just listening to each other, because we wanted to kind of always feel into where the girls were and not jump ahead, not be teaching them things that they weren't ready to know, and always listening to kind of the signs, notice what stage of puberty are they at, are their breasts growing yet, are they ask what questions are they asking, what are they interested in. So it was really led by the girls, and we'd always, what do you want to do, and they might say, can we have popcorn next month, so we might do fire lighting and popcorn, but there was always like a drum journey or a story or something around becoming a woman. So it was and that was the beauty of having 5 of us kind of holding it, because we all had different gifts to bring so we could weave in all our different gifts. And also the mothers would step up and offer things as well, because I always felt that as a core group we kind of felt it was important for the girls to see their mum shining. And although they would squirm, they hated seeing their mum stepping up and they'd be like, oh, my mum's talking, it's so embarrassing. But it was really important for them to see their mums step into that role of holding whatever activity or story or whatever it might be. So it was really mixed.
It was really mixed? Is that what you said?
Yeah. The offerings were very mixed.
Yeah, so I'm curious, because I can understand a group of girls asking for popcorn, right? But if they haven't been exposed to these stories and these practices, they wouldn't know what to ask for. So would you discuss what to offer the girls based on what you were noticing in the girls and what was going on for them, what they might need? Like you mentioned, so-and-so's breasts are growing and so-and-so's isn't yet. And would you offer something around the natural, something around the breasts or something? I mean, I don't know what you would offer. I mean, but you're saying the girls were leading it, but if they didn't know what to ask for, how do you offer it in a way, offer something that's serving them, even though they're not even aware perhaps that they need that thing, and make it something that they then are on board with, and it's not just an embarrassing thing that their mom and their aunties are trying to get them to do.
Yeah. And that's the really fine balance. And I think that's the bit that was almost the hardest, because it's, as the core group, we felt we actually were watching the girls, tuning in with the girls, and almost holding that energy all month. And we would meet every week between the monthly meets, and we'd discuss, if one of our daughters was in the group, we'd talk about our daughter, we'd talk about what we noticed. So although the girls would say, we'd like more games, we'd like more stories, could we do some art, we'd like to learn about journaling, they would ask those questions. But yeah, the embarrassing bits they didn't want to talk about, so we would find ways of bringing that in. So say we noticed maybe one of the girls having kind of issues with her looks, or just having that, suddenly she became very obsessed. We did a whole thing around, we bought mirrors and we decorated mirrors, and we talked about being beautiful on all levels of, and talked about women's bodies. Or one session we went to a beach and we created a beautiful like mermaid in the sand, this massive mermaid, and made her big voluptuous breasts and big voluptuous, oh, she was pregnant, and we talked about birth, and just doing that and having a craft activity that they're absorbed in. They ask questions and they're not really noticing that they're asking the questions, and they're not noticing their embarrassment. And as soon as you get talking about a topic, the birth topic, they just, some of the, not all of the girls, but some of them just had so many questions. Like they've been bursting to ask somebody. So it's almost like a magical alchemy of all of that coming together. But I always find, even with women's circles, you give them a craft activity, and somehow the chatter starts and the questions start, and the flow just happens naturally. But yeah.
And so it sounds like then you're meeting for shorter periods of time throughout the month. You were meeting with this group, and
that was just the core group.
Just the core group. Yeah. Okay. And so another question I have is, so this is obviously a group of people that has the time and resources to take a whole day with lady friends and their daughters out of the month.
That was a commitment.
Yeah.
It was a real commitment, and a commitment to their daughters. That was the kind of, it was like a real, for some of the women, it was a commitment for themselves as well, because they got a lot out of it. It might be the only thing that they were doing, but it was like, I want to commit to spending a day with my daughter.
Yeah. And so this is a certain set of people that would have, of moms that would have this awareness and this ability to say, I want to take a day to spend with my daughter. If they had other children, they had the resources to have someone else taking care of the children. They weren't one of these moms that's working 2 jobs as a single mom to make ends meet 24/7. Some of them.
So is that sound?
What's that?
Sorry, it sounds like the sound's a bit echoey.
Oh, no, it's good. So you're saying some of the moms were working 2 jobs and organizing their lives around this priority too.
Yeah, there was definitely, one mum, single mum with a child who's autistic, who she had to find childcare for, who, it was on a Sunday. So, most of us have Sundays as a home day.
Gotcha.
So, for some of the mums it was a big thing, and we were charging them, because that was one of the things we said, if you want us to hold this as a core group, this is a lot of our time, so we need donations. We did manage to secure some funding at the start to pay for materials and things like that, but the previous groups we've set up in different ways financially, just because that was quite a learning curve, and also a big responsibility in the end for the core group that were holding it. Because we all, as life happens, we all go through ups and downs, and sometimes we just needed to step back and say, actually, I need some time off for a few months. Someone else needs to step in, or so. Yeah, it was a massive journey, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but it was a big responsibility.
Yes, I bet. And so once you started this 5-year journey, was it the same moms the whole time through, or did some new ones come in, some drop out?
Yeah, well, I think the first couple of years we opened and closed a few times because people dropped out or moved away. But once, I think after about 2 years, the girls actually decided they didn't want to open again, because they felt like when new people joined, they had to kind of start again and go over things. And we got to the point with them where we were doing shamanic journeys, and they were getting a power animal and things like that, if someone comes in, they've never done any of that stuff, it's all a bit weird. So we decided at that point to kind of close the group and just hold it. Yeah. Like
beautiful.
That. Yeah.
After 2 years, so the last 3 years was the same group. Beautiful. And so I'm curious, when you first got started, it was you, this one friend said, let's do this. And then you had several others. How many were in the core group initially? 5. And these were friends that you already knew from your daughters perhaps being in school together or things like that. And then you got together and you worked out what you were going to offer. and put the word out to the rest of the community. And I'm imagining that the other moms that joined, they were people that kind of already knew you in the community, or were there any that were like complete strangers and showed up and just jumped right in?
There was a couple of women I didn't know. Some of them were red tent mums that had been coming to the red tent. But yeah, a couple of the women I didn't know, and maybe had heard of me, or had knew one of the other mums. I mean, it got to the point where we were kind of holding mothers away because we couldn't. We were in a yurt that could only hold so many people, but you know, it was just like, actually, this isn't doable. And that's where we got to the point where we started training women so that they could do it themselves, because it's like, we can't be all over the country, we can't be running groups, there's only so many weekends in the month.
So you had, once you closed the group, you still had more people interested, and you hosted separate trainings about how to get groups like this going for themselves in their community. Wow.
Yeah.
And so I have one other question. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's mostly word of mouth from the girls talking about at school or with their friends, whatever, you know. So it was all led by the girls, and how much the girls loved it and how much they were getting from it.
So were all of the girls already menstruating when they started? Probably not. And so did you have processes around that, like the girls who weren't menstruating yet and the girls who were already menstruating, perhaps supporting each other, or, you know, and then did each girl have her own ceremony that the group did when she did start bleeding? And tell us about that.
So yeah, because none of them were bleeding, so we were leading them up to this threshold, kind of teaching them about cycle awareness, teaching them about the moon, teaching them about their body, and talking about their dreams and all the changes on all levels that they'll go through. And we decided, kind of as a group of moms, that once the first girl that started bleeding, if she wanted it, we would celebrate her. So if a girl started bleeding that month, whatever we decided we were doing the next Sunday went out of the window, and she had a ceremony. You know, there was cake, there was presents, there was singing, you know, that was the focus. Some of the girls didn't want to have that, and I always think that's their choice. And you know, my eldest was the same. It took about 3 years for her to decide she wanted a ceremony, and it was almost, she had to witness some before she was comfortable with it. So, and that's the other beauty of community ceremonies, where the younger girls see the older girls being celebrated and they look forward to it. Like my 10-year-old is so excited, and her ceremony is all planned exactly what she wants.
Wow.
You know, that's the difference of kind of, whereas, you know, the first few girls were brave, you know, kind of doing this without having really witnessed it. Although I think the year before I'd put out a community ceremony. Does any women who've never been celebrated want to go back and revisit that and have a ceremony? So some of them had come to that and witnessed some of the women having that ceremony. But so yeah, and it was again about really listening to the girls and asking them what they wanted. Although we kind of ended up with a similar format, where all the girls got a beautiful red shawl and they were all painted with ochre or henna and sung to, but then there would be, you know, a different cake or a different presents, or they might ask for something. Some of them wanted their feet washed, some of them might want petals or flowers, or, you know, so yeah. And I think I remember one, I think we had 6 months where every month was a ceremony.
Wow. Oh wow, that's exciting. Well, how many girls did you have in the
I think we started with about 12. I mean, a few of them dropped off, and it was interesting because we did end up with a kind of split where we had the older girls who'd started bleeding, and then a few of the younger girls who hadn't, and you could really start to see a difference in the group. And that was kind of the last year where it kind of started to change, because the older girls were just in such a different place and needed different things. So yeah, and actually the younger girls, I think because they'd been coming for so long, they almost got a bit bored of it and they started wanting something else. So there was a real kind of you know, how can we hold this anymore? And actually some of the younger girls were going, we don't want this anymore, we're a bit bored with the smudging and the singing, and we want to do horse riding, we want to do fire lighting with the boys. And we were kind of like, that's fine too, that's not what we're offering, but you know, we can create that. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's where the group kind of ended up finishing, and we did a beautiful goodbye ceremony and kind of closed the group, but everyone's still in touch. And you know,
Wow.
those old, you know, they all hang out in their peer groups anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
I imagine that you had the opportunity on numerous occasions to help these girls navigate relationships with their peers who weren't having this kind of experience that might have been awkward or difficult. That because it feels to me like this regular gathering with other women and girls with this sacred intention teaches a way of relating that is honoring and respectful, and it might just sort of naturally eliminate some of the competitiveness and meanness that young teenage girls can experience with each other when this kind of relating isn't modeled. And I imagine you had opportunities to help some of the girls who came to the gathering just all upset about a disappointing relationship with other girls who weren't having this kind of experience. I'm curious, you know, how you may have supported the girls through that, of like recognizing that not all other women are going to be relating in the same way.
yeah, I think it just through kind of teaching them about sitting in circle and listening to one another. So you know, there's that one level of communication and
Mm-hmm.
that real listening and holding space. And I, you know, when you were talking, then it kind of came to mind one of the girls coming in, and she was talking about a girl in her school who was going off with boys, and you know, you could see she's going down a bad path, and she actually, her words were, she's losing her soul skin. And I was just like, you know, this is a 14-year-old who can see another 14-year-old is losing her soul, is giving parts of herself away already too soon. And it just made me so kind of almost overwhelmed with that kind of, that, you know, they don't really know what they're getting from this group. It's so unconscious, and you know, such a special thing. But just the fact that she knew to use that language, and she could see what this other girl was going down, and that she, you know, she was like, I'm never going to do that, I can see what she's doing. And yeah, and that was one of the biggest things. And when we did the vision quest with the older girls, having that space where they were there without their mums, and actually them being able to bring maybe things that they wouldn't talk about in front of their mums, just two of us, myself and my friend who started it together, we held the vision quest with them. And yeah, it was, and that for me, the whole point is that they build relationships with other women that are not their mums, that they can talk to in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if you know Gail Burkett's work. She's written a book called Gifts from the Elders, and she talks about how girls start
Yeah.
to look for peers, and they look at the older girl, they look at the teens, don't they? And maybe those teens are not particularly good role models. So you know, that was the point of bringing the lodge together and bringing women that I mean, not intentionally, we didn't pick women that would be good role models, but that was the idea, that we were holding that space
Mm-hmm.
so that they could come to us, or that almost in a way imitate us instead of the teen girl.
Mm-hmm.
As a way of being. So yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure that's your question.
No, that does answer my question, and I'm curious about this language of losing her soul skin. Was that from a story, a folk tale? I vaguely have a memory of a folk tale about a silky,
The seal skin, yeah.
the
So
seal skin.
so that's Clarissa Pinkolas Estes, the sealskin story, which we used mostly with women, menopausal women actually, about when you're coming into menopause, you're calling back all the bits of yourself and making yourself whole again. But we talk to them about it as well, because they're right at the beginning before they even lose their soul skin. So we were like, we brought in the practice of making a medicine bundle, and that the medicine bundle was their soul skin, and they can put all their precious things in it, and this is part of them, and to be just to not be careful, but just be aware of your own energy and where you're giving it out, and weaving that into the different times of the month where we're more open and more closed, and who we let in and out at those times. So there was so many layers to the teachings that we were doing.
Wow. So did you talk with them directly about the womb as having certain powers besides menstruation? I mean, for me, when I, in my teachings, I talk about the wise womb membrane, where that soul skin sounds very similar to that, where we can be contained in our own energy and have our own membrane of wisdom around us. And for me, it's kind of this coming inside our own womb, or letting our womb's wisdom expand to surround us and inform the boundaries of our energy, only allowing in beneficial energies and keeping out unbeneficial energies, and containing our energies within, and choosing wisely when to give of our energies and when we need to be replenished. And so I'm curious if you used any of that kind of languaging, teaching the girls about their wombs as a source of power.
Absolutely, that was my role in the group.
Ah.
I mean, I haven't heard that, the womb membrane. I love that; it's beautiful. But yes, that was my role of kind of teaching them their womb wisdom, and the power of their womb, and the whole cycle, and how they feel at different times. And one girl particularly sticks out for me, because we talked about how noticing the moon first, because they weren't bleeding, so we got them to kind of journal around how do you feel at the different moon phases. And one of the girls who particularly found full moon really difficult, and really went into herself at the full moon, whereas our kind of traditional, what we're taught around that map, is that the full moon is out there, party time, feeling your fullness. And I was just like, and that's okay, that's how you feel, and that's okay. And the dark moon was when she was happy out. And so I was just like, there is no map, there's there's a guide but you are your own guide. And it was really about getting them to really listen to themselves, and notice all of those changes in themselves before they even start their cycle. So it was just like constantly drip feeding, planting seeds.
Right. So then it becomes a natural evolution to say, oh, so where does your menstrual cycle, when did you start bleeding? What phase of the moon? And I mean, I talk to women all the time about what age they were when they started bleeding, but if I asked them what day it was and what phase of the moon it was, they weren't, most people weren't tracking that or paying attention to that. They had no support of that. Did you set up like charts for them and calendars and moon calendars for them, and then it was just an easy red dot to add to that tracking calendar with them? Beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's one of the things that I just did automatically at that age. It was kind of like I would journal, I'd put a big P in red on my diary and I just found it weird that no one else did that. So it's always been in me to teach women step one, that's what you start doing.
And do you teach them did you teach them the history of the calendar system, that originally it was based more on the lunar cycles, and that we had 13 months, and that corresponded to the 13 menstrual cycles that most women have every year, and that was deliberately disrupted?
Yeah, without focusing too much on patriarchy and trying to keep it light, but yes, absolutely. And yeah.
But I'm sure there was that one girl who was like, well, why? I mean, that would have been me in your group. I would have been, well, why was it disrupted? Well, why did they do that? That would have been me.
Anyone did.
No, okay. Well, if I was in that group, that would have been like I would have been nagging at you to tell me the answer to those questions. uh, well, wonderful. So I'm curious about how, like someone like myself, I haven't had children. I don't have a daughter. I'm not planning on having children, and yet I'm very drawn to contributing to this reclaiming of this for young women. And but because I don't have a daughter, I don't have connections into that mothering community per se. Um, and so I don't have like friends of my daughter's mothers that I connect with because they're going to school together or anything like that. And I'm not working with children professionally. I used to. So as a school teacher, I might have been I might have had more, um, people knowing me. And if I offered something, the parents might bring their kids and bring themselves to something that I was offering. But I'm just curious if you have any ideas or like if, I've often considered starting like a summer camp for girls based on herbalism or something like that for my local community where they come and spend the day with me and like that. But again, I'm not, I would have to like go to the schools and talk to do a talk for the parents about the summer camp or, they would need to get to know me before they, brought their kids to my event. So I'm curious if you have any insights or ideas about that.
I guess I came out of our red tent movement, so I don't know if you have kind of those women's circles that happen, and it was, that those were the connections, and even, we had she was a grandmother, but I feel that it's really important to have other women, older women bringing different wisdom. So even the last group that I started, which was for my daughter, which we set up 2 years ago, I invited because my mother doesn't live near me anymore, and her other grandmother isn't interested in this kind of stuff. So I actually invited one of the other elders from our red tent if she would come and be like a grandmother figure. So, I think there's ways of doing things like that. But we've also done camps as well. And from those camps, some of the mothers, because they came from all over the UK to where we live to kind of see how I guess it was almost like a mini training to see how we do it and to pick up some tips from us, and they've kind of gone off and started their own groups. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's about getting clear what you want to offer and put it out there. You just kind of see it. We found that women just jumped at it, and it was healing for the mums. That's the thing, because when before I started all of this, I was going into some of the schools and doing talks around menstruation and positive periods, and I've lost my thread.
You went into the schools and did talks about menstruation.
Yeah, but it's kind of like capturing the the girls loved it, but then they're going home to their mums talking about it in a negative way, or it still being in the curse or whatever. So that was when I realized I needed to get the mums on board. Uh-huh. We all need to be on the same page with this. So, which is almost why we did the whole kind of working as a group that were holding it. We worked through our own stuff, so we were all on the same page when we brought the mums in, and then I did circle work with the mums in the morning. So again, all the mums were on the same page. So, sort of saying we're not going to use negative language about our menstruation in front of the girls. You might have a negative experience, and that might be your experience, but in front of the girls, let's hold that positivity, and it's okay for them to know that yes, you can have pain, and yes, it can be really heavy, but let's not focus too much on it being one of the mums had really negative words for it, and I was like, oh no, we're not going to talk about it like that. And actually, interestingly, I've done some womb work with that mother since, and it's all changed. So it can all be changed around. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So after you talked at the schools and realized, okay, I need to get with the moms, that's when you started getting with the other moms and saying, let's start this group thing. Because, I mean, you're not going to invite the moms into the school for the talk with the girls. Did you?
Well, I did, actually.
You did?
I did. We did some after school ones. And again, I mean, it was tricky because, I'm a bit of a mad hippie, and you get some of the mums who were maybe a bit more just straighter, and they were quite challenged by me, so I had to modify myself.
What did you do? Did you slick your hair back into put on some makeup, nylons, high heel shoes, pencil skirt? No, you didn't do any of that.
I didn't do any of that, but the first one, you see, I created a beautiful altar, which is just what I do. But of course, for some people, that was just too much. Just walking into a room where someone had created an altar with a cup that looked like it had blood in and a goddess on it. I lost them; they were out the door. So it was like, okay, I can't do that. I need to just make it more almost science-based, more just focusing on menstruation. Once you've got them in that, then you can bring in the more spiritual aspects of it, but not to go first with the spiritual stuff, which is what I was doing. But still, I mean, I didn't do it a lot, but I did. Yeah, they were kind of just a couple of hours after school, and I did it more as a circle. I got them to sit on the floor in the classroom, and we'd have a circle, and sort of share. The mums would share their first period story with the girls, and we'd just talk about our bodies and why it was good to be a girl. And I'd send them home with a little pack with the charting stuff in, and that's, I guess, where my book came from as well, because it was just like all the bits of paper I was putting together as a pack. Like, okay, this all just needs to go into a book.
And so the schools knew you, and when did you approach the schools and say, I want to do talks in your classes for the young girls?
Well, I was actually invited. So it was the school that my eldest children went to, and I'd had a really good relationship with one of the teachers, and she became the head. And they had two girls who were 8 and 9 who'd started their menstruation, and the school didn't know what to do. They hadn't even started doing any education around body stuff at that age. The mothers were totally kind of freaked out. They didn't even have sanitary bins to put products in
for that young of girls. No,
so I guess bringing me in was just a way to deal with that problem.
For younger girls starting their periods. That's quite young.
Yeah. And then I was invited to our local Steiner school, Waldorf school, where they're a bit more kind of open-minded. And again, I think sometimes the teachers just find it really embarrassing having this conversation, so let's pay someone else. And I don't know about over in the States, but normally high schools have like the lady from Tampax comes with all her free samples and brainwashes them, and so it's quite hard to get into schools to do this kind of work. And I think more and more women are doing it now. More and more people, I know women who are already teachers who are bringing this work into schools and talking to the girls more about the whole of the cycle and the moon and the kind of the whole emotional spiritual aspect of it, as well as just the anatomy and physiology. So it is happening slowly.
Right. Well, you're giving me lots of inspiration. I know I was invited recently at the beginning of this last school year. One of the moms at the local charter school was inviting my husband and I to lead sort of mentoring circles with the kids. They wanted people who weren't parents at the schools to come in and offer mentoring. And we were going to do it, but then they never followed up with it. And now with the situation with the pandemic, things are on pause. But, we are well known enough in the community. I started making donations for their fundraiser years ago, and every year they reach out to me and I donate some of my herbal products or some of my hands-on healing services, and they auction them off, and so I'm contributing in my way to their fundraising. And I'm friends with some of the parents of the kids at the school, and so so that's a doorway in. And I feel like if I'd follow up on that and say, hey, do you still want to do this? But they're not offering to pay me. They're offering me to be a volunteer for this mentoring.
Yeah. That's the thing, I mean, it's kind of, there's a fine line. I think you have to choose where you give your service and what you need to be paid for. And that's why, I mean, in the beginning, we looked into funding, and over in the UK, there is small pots. I mean, we got like £3,000, which was enough to start us off, and it paid for the first camp, and it paid towards materials. They made like a mother drum, a big drum that they could go in the centre of the yurt that they could all play. So, we use that money for some really beautiful things for them.
Where did you get the funding from? Was it an organization or?
Well, over here we've got the National Lottery, so they do lots of different. So I think that was Awards for All, which is a small pot. I think it's bigger now. I think you can get up to £10,000 from them now if they think if they like what you are trying to do.
So you wrote a proposal and sent it in and applied for one of these grants.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked into grant writing and applying for different grants.
We focused on a lot on being in nature and nature connection. We didn't really talk about menstruation.
Right. Well, I could focus on nature and gardening and herbalism or something like that. And then,
Exactly.
Yeah. Or even artistic, art or something like that. Yeah. Well, so wonderful and inspiring to talk with you about all this. So your book, what's the name of your book? Tell me again. She has it right there. Menarche, A Journey into Womanhood, a Mom's and Girls Guide to Celebrating. Wonderful. And I love your red tent on the cover.
That's not mine. That was at a friend's festival. That's actually my goddaughter on the front. She went to this festival and had that photo taken, and I just said, can I put that on my book?
Yeah.
It's not my TP, someone else's.
Beautiful. Okay, so, and is that available on Amazon, or where can one get a copy of that book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. If you're in the UK, if you buy it from me, I get a bit more money. So it's on my website.
Great. And so where is that website? If somebody wanted to get in touch with you and find out more about what you're doing, can you tell us your website?
It's Rachael Crow, and Rachael is AEL at the end. So it's rachaelcrow.co.uk, and there's a tab on there that's called Girls Lodge, and it's got the whole history and story of our mum and daughter lodge, and it's got some of the kind of plans of what we did in the day, and it's got blog entries of kind of the girls' feedback and photos and stuff. So if you're particularly interested in that bit of it, that's where all the information on that is.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So thank you again so much for joining us. Is there any last things you want to say to encourage listeners about nourishing menarche and healing menarche?
I just think, I think one of the most common questions I get is, when do you start talking about it? And I just say, as soon as they start asking. And in my experience, my daughter started asking at about 3 when she saw me using my cloth. I use cloth pads, and she asked me what they were, and she said, why do you bleed, mummy? And so we had the whole conversation. That's my other book. I've got a book for younger children, but let's normalize this. Let's make it part of our everyday conversation if it needs to be, and all women bleed. We have to break the taboos of these conversations and just make them really normal. And even my little boy today, who is 7, was helping me sort through some of the cloth pads, and he said, I really want some of these, mummy. I know I'm not a girl, but I want some cloth pads.
Are you gonna give him some? I mean, that's a great thing for a young man to have, that, you know, because if he has a girlfriend over eventually and she needs something, for him to whip out a package of cloth pads to give to her, that's a real, I mean, he's going to be a hot item if you know, if you keep him stashed with cloth pads for his, you know, potential girlfriends. Oh my goodness.
I hadn't thought of that, but maybe.
I mean, you know,
Yeah, what a cool boyfriend.
yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I think that's a really good, inspiring note for us to end on. I just want to remind listeners, if you want to learn more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com and find out about all the lovely offerings there as well. So thank you so much again, Rachael, for joining us, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. And may all men be, you know, having cloth pads to offer the women in their lives when they need them. That's my prayer for the day. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all for now.